You're listening to another episode of On Our Best Behavior, and today I have a very special guest. He is a lifelong Anoka resident, neighbor, politician, expert property appraiser, community volunteer, and Anoka City Council member. I have Erik I can't say it.
Skogquist.
Skogquist. The long O. I should be good. I'm really good at saying boat, so I should be really good at saying Skogquist.
There you go. Just it's very Minnesotan way to say it. Just Skogquist.
Yeah,
You'll be all good.
always drag out those O's. All right, Erik. So tell me what I missed. Give me a little introduction about yourself.
Sure. So, my name's Erik Skogquist. Like you said, I'm mostly lifelong in Oak, and when I was really little, we actually lived out in Nowthen. That's kind of where the
Oh, yeah.
Skogquist family. They're all farmers out there back when it was rural Anoka, but not so rural anymore out there. So we ended up moving into town when I was like 3, 4 years old, and then pretty much been here ever since, except for a little stint in college at the U of M. But otherwise, it's a great place, and so that's why I'm still here and have a wife, a couple kids, and then do this city council thing kind of on the side. So I have a pretty full life, but it's a good life. It's fun, and I always like to be involved and busy.
So I think it's interesting when people grow up somewhere and then decide, like, this is where I want to be my whole life. When I was a kid, I was like, I am going to get out of this town, not Anoka. I'm not from here my whole life. I grew up in East Bethel, but I went to St. Francis High School and I was like, I am getting out of this town. I don't want to live here forever. And then I found Anoka when I was 21 and I loved it. And now I'm 41. I've been here for 20 years and I love this city. So I can see what's great about it, but I didn't grow up here. You grew up here, you went to college, and you said, you know what? I'm going back to Anoka. I'm going to raise my family and build my future there. Why is Anoka special to you?
Well, you said the keyword family. So for me, that's a big part of it. So when I was, trying to figure out what am I going to do when I grow up, that type of thing, it's always what are my interests and what do I want to go to school for? And so I had applied to the University of Minnesota and I was going to be a park ranger. That was my thing. So I went for natural resource management. I got accepted. I even got scholarships, all this stuff. I'm like, all right, this is what I want to do. Very outdoorsy. I've been in, scouts as a kid and all these different things. And so that's what I decided I want to do. But, I came to this realization at some point that I probably have to be away from people and, travel or maybe accept a job wherever that is, which could be an hour away. It could be 1,000 miles away. So I started to have second thoughts about that really because even that little bit in college, only being in, Minneapolis at the U of M, um, I felt that draw back to Anoka, to my family, the place that I called home. And I remember this one time when I was working. I worked in Home Depot in college for a little while, and uh, I got scheduled, and it was during the Halloween parade, and I was so angry I couldn't get off. That was my only 8 hours they scheduled me all week, and I was just like, all right, I'm gonna have a life choice here, what I want to do with myself. So changed little college jobs, but really decided after about 2 years of living down there by the U of M, I decided, you know what, I'm going to be in Anoka. I'll just commute, and that's kind of what I did, and I've just been around ever since. And it's again not just family too, but it's just like you said, Anoka is a really unique place. It's a fun town, it's a creative town, and one thing I think is really neat about it that hopefully this lasts a long time, but it's got that mixture of like I can be in a small town, by a big city. I can go 10 miles away, and I'm kind of out in rural area, or I can go 10 or 15 miles the other way, and you're in the city. It's kind of a crossroads of so many places, and it's really preserved its history and its culture and stuff over the years, even if it's changed. It's got all of those little things, and maybe I think that's a lot of the reason why I like to be here.
And fun fact, you and I actually live on the same road. So I think that's always like, yeah, we are for real neighbors.
Totally.
So going back to figuring out what you want to be when you grow up, I think that's interesting that you said that you wanted to be a park ranger because my son like says he wants to be an electrician because he thinks that that's like achievable. But he always says like, I want to be a DNR officer. That would be a fun job. And so I think it's funny that you had went to school to thinking that you were going to be a park ranger. But yeah, that's very true. Like the hope of going to school to be that and then to work in like Anoka or even Minnesota alone is probably not that easy to achieve. So I always am trying to teach my kids like find out what your true passion is and try to incorporate that into a career, because if you can find a job that you like, that is something that you love doing, it's going to be a lot easier of a road, right? If you have to do work but you enjoy it, like that makes life easier. And you are passionate about preserving historical places, and you found a career doing that. I mean, you get to assess properties and try to preserve historic buildings in Anoka and the surrounding areas. And so how did you go from wanting to be a park ranger to deciding I'm going to appraise historical buildings?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So what started was, I thought this is what I want to do, and then I started to have those realizations about what that meant. And at the same time, um, I was starting to figure this out senior year, kind of high school into college. My brother, older brother, his name is Bjorn. He's 5 years older than me. Um, he decided he was going to run for mayor because he had some beefs on a few things, and he was all of 22 years old, and he won. And so he was mayor of Anoka for 8 years in his 20s, retired at the old age of 30. And so as this, I'm thinking of all these things, I'm seeing what he's doing and how he's involved, and I started to pay more attention to civic things in my own community. And that really started to show me that that was something I had a lot of interest in. So I shifted while I was in school. I shifted over to dual degrees in political science and then urban studies. So
Mm.
city planning, sociology, geography, history, kind of all that stuff mixed in together. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be a city planner. That'll be my thing instead. Um, and so this kind of interest in local government was born by not only something that was happening in my life and with my family, but also having a big impact on this city that I live in and I love. So that's kind of where the shift sort of started to happen for me. And then 2005 or so, I got out of college and started looking for jobs. And it wasn't a great market at that point. It wasn't bad yet, but so I just couldn't find things I was interested in. So I did my old fallback, which for me was a carpentry construction. And I grew up in old houses in Anoka, in one of those fixer-upper type families. So I was used to working at older houses, and that kind of filled the gap for a while. I would do remodeling and things on folks' older houses because there just wasn't a lot of people that understood, how to get different size lumber and how to match materials and all that type of stuff that I just kind of learned from growing up around it. So I was doing that on the side and cobbling different things together. And then my wife's family is also from Anoka. They live kind of up by Wilson School, and
Mm-hmm.
the neighbor's father was a property assessor, and he was an independent contractor. Wasn't one that worked for a city or a county, just kind of contracted with different places. And so he was looking for somebody to work with him. So I thought, all right, I'll give this a shot, see what it's like, and I really enjoyed it. It's just kind of a mixture of a lot of things. A little bit of math, geography, history, construction, and then just shooting the breeze with people too. So that's that's something I
Yeah.
really enjoy doing as well. And so that's kind of how I fell into that, and I really enjoyed it. And the niche I have is I just work in a lot of different communities throughout the state of Minnesota. And one thing that I think is really cool about that is I get to see these little microcosms. Every city, every township, they're all kind of different, but they're all sort of the same. And I can see what works for ones and what doesn't work for some, and kind of take those ideas back with me. And so that's really what I do for my paying gig. Not that I don't get paid to be on city council, but it's enough to cover those lunch bills and all that type of stuff. And so it's a really a good fit for me. I've kind of created my own niche and really enjoyed it.
So, first of all, I want to tell you that as somebody who lives in a house built in 1948 and being only the second person who's ever lived in this house, which I think is amazing that the people
Wow.
who lived in my house before me built this house and like lived here, raised their kids, and died. And then 20 something year old me comes along and buys it. And here I am, 40 plus, and still living here. But whenever something needs to be done, it's like you cannot go to Menards and just buy a window or a door. Like everything is like custom. And then you want to keep like the charm of the house, right? Like I think that's one of the things that's fun about living in old Anoka is all these houses have so much charm and character, and it's not like if when you go to a new development, all the houses kind of just look the same. They're all just like a little bit different or a little bit different color. Where all of these houses are completely different, in my opinion, and I love that. So that is definitely a challenge and a good thing that you're good at since you like to restore new houses and we're going to get to your house. Yeah, that's definitely been a challenge for me.
Absolutely. It's not the easiest in the world, but you find the right people that understand it, and it makes a world of difference. And that is, why one of the things about Anoka that's cool is not just the people that I really enjoy, but it's just a unique environment. It's an older town. There's a lot of older towns, but like I said, it's kind of a mixture of older and new, city, rural. It's all these things together, which probably would drive some people crazy, but for me, I love it.
So you're on the city council. What does a city council member do?
So a city council member is basically it's a part-time job. Um, the minimal you do is you have to attend meetings every month. So we have about 3 meetings every month, two officials council meetings, and then like a work session or a workshop where you kind of hash stuff out. And so there's that portion of it. But then there's all sorts of subgroups and committees that people are on, and there's all that meeting discussion stuff. And then there's the other part of it, which to me is a really important part. Is just that those soft things that you going, attending events, reaching out to people, answering their questions and phone calls and emails, trying to solve problems for folks. That to me is a big part of the job that I think some elected officials are better at than others. Some put more energy into it than others. I try to put a lot into that because, to be quite honest with you, when I was not an elected official, but I was still um, very actively engaged. I was on the park board prior, and just was somebody that was interested and sometimes butt heads with people at City Hall. Uh, the response back was not always great. Sometimes it was just ignored. Sometimes it felt like it really was just we're just giving you kind of lip service. And so I don't want to do that as a city council member. I've been on the outside of that, and it's not fun. So I tell people that if there is an issue or concern or you're not getting traction, just let me know, because I can bring that forward and I can point something out. Not all the time, but a lot of times there can be movement and things can get done. So I think that's a big part of the job.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about you is and I'm going to get to that too, but I just see you in the community so active in my 20 years of being in Anoka. I really haven't seen anyone as active as you in the community, and I applaud that.
I
So,
appreciate that. Thank you.
can you share some of the current initiatives or projects that the city council is working on right now?
Yeah, so I feel like there's been so many things the last couple years. It's just crazy how Anoka's the population isn't that different. It's been 17, 18,000 people for a long time, but just the amount of action and activity that happens in the city and decisions that are made I mean, I feel like it's doubled in 20 years from when I first started paying attention to all this stuff. And I think part of that is just the growth of the community around us as well. Anoka is its own city, but I live in Anoka, but I don't just live in Anoka. I shop in Coon Rapids. I go
Yeah.
to Champlin. Ramsey and all these places, right? And the other people do the same thing. And so one thing I started to tell people that I've noticed is Anoka is really kind of the downtown and I would say the core neighborhoods of a city of probably 200,000. It's just people don't care about where the city line stops and ends. They go shopping one place, they live someplace, and all that type of stuff is important. So I think that's a lot of the reasons why it's grown and just got so much more life and activity, and that comes with challenges. Some of the challenges that we've been dealing with, obviously, is we have traffic, everybody talks about that, all these highway
Mhm.
projects. Um, the roads, the main highways are the same as they were in 1960. The population in Anoka and around is not the same. And so that comes with a lot of challenges. We've kind of mostly done with all the Highway 10 projects, but that was really a city driven thing. Kind of a crazy situation when you think about it, but it was a U.S. highway, Highway 10 and 169. And then typically what you do is you just have to wait around for the state or the feds to finally come up with money and say, all right, we're going to do your project now. Well, what happened always was Anoka never got it because the second you got to the Anoka border, all of a sudden you had skinny roads and cemeteries and 7 bridges, and it just became too big of a thing uh, for them to start. So it never happened. And so the city, and to give credit, this started somewhat before I was on the council too. But it was just, all right, let's go get grant funds. Let's come up with a plan ourselves that we can live with. And so that was starting. And then as I was on the council, that was continuing. And the city of Anoka ended up coming up with over $80 million of grant funds from the feds and the state and all sorts of areas. And said, all right, state, we got a project, we got money, let's go. And so that's what happened. And then on top of that, the state said, well, now that you're going to fix the areas, basically, if you think from like Greenhaven and the old Perkins to the Ramsey border, that was the Anoka project to kind of get rid of the lights and all of that. Then the state said, all right, we'll come up with some money and we'll rebuild Ferry Street and we'll do all that other stuff from basically the golf course to Coon Rapids. And so that synergy that got created around the project became huge. And now other cities, Ramsey as an example, their projects are happening to get rid of their lights because they followed the same model. They went and got their own funds. And so that's a really powerful thing if you look at that, of a city of 18,000 people came forward with the money and created this big project. And so we continue to kind of try to do that with other things. Where we've been trying to do some stuff along Highway 47. That's another it's a cow path that got paved, and it's been that way for a very, very long time. But there's challenges, there's the railroad tracks, there's there's manufacturing, or excuse me, like the scrapyard, there's the fairgrounds,
The
there's
fair.
houses up right along there. I mean, it's a tight, difficult corridor. So that one might take a while, but we're going to keep working on it. And then one other thing that's been taking a lot of time lately, but there's a jail expansion that's in the works for Anoka County. That's something they've been wanting to do for a while, and so it's this delicate balance between what does Anoka County need, and I think they need to decide for themselves what do they need, and then what can the city of Anoka handle in its location currently. And so we've been kind of at odds a little bit on that, but we've been talking and we're trying to work out a plan. So now again, kind of following that same model, the city is putting some time and energy into coming up with some options that says this is what we can live with. If you want Plan A, which is a very large, triple expansion of the current jail capacity, probably not going to work in its current location because we don't want to take out some of those neighborhoods. We don't want to take out streets. All of these things that a large jail would mean for that location.
Yeah, because that's already like located on like a whole block itself. So if you did expand it, right, you would be going into other blocks and homes, and absolutely.
Correct. So that's something that we're working on, and we're trying to come up with a resolution. So we're working with the county board. There's kind of fits and starts and all that type of stuff, but we'll get there. And so in the end, I think we'll get a rebuilt kind of safe jail that will work with the capacity of Anoka County, but also not kind of be this giant albatross in the city, core of the city of Anoka. So that's just some of those things, but there's always little stuff the little stuff is the stuff I really like. Just working on expanding sidewalks, getting bike trails, trying to get little developments, unique things here or there. We're trying to angle to see if we can get a hotel downtown right now. So that would be pretty awesome. So we got some funding to just do a study to start marketing. So hopefully in the near future, something like that can happen where people not only can come downtown, but they can stay down there. And that just, if you've been here 20 years, you kind of remember that. I would say Anoka was one of these towns where there was 3 bars and you opened a 4th and one of them would close, right? There was just only so much capacity for things. And if you really look at the last 15 years or 10 years even. I just use bars as an example, but I mean, there's other businesses, unique places, yarn stores, um, Ambi wine bar, speakeasies, all these other unique things, the mill sites, an event center. So over time, more things have kind of built up and created a situation where they feed off of each other and they complement each other really well.
I like that a lot. I like that idea. I never really thought about that, but yeah, there's so many neat little bars and restaurants, and it's the kind of area where you can kind of hop from place to place. Like everything has a little bit something different to offer. And then you have the river, which is beautiful and scenic. The whole social district thing, like that opens up a whole nother good reason for having a place to stay. The event center when there's weddings, and there's all these cute little shops and antique shops and stores and ice cream, and I love that idea. I think that's really great because that, like you said, that's one of the things I love about Anoka is there's seriously every possible thing you could want. Bakeries. I mean, I love it. I love it. It's great. I think that's a good idea. So if you are not even an Anoka resident, but any city resident, how can they become more involved in their community? I feel like a lot of people like to be pros on the couch, and I see a lot of people putting in their 2 cents on social media in the Anoka community page, and it's always like just arguments. And so anyway, if you actually want to do something about it, how can you?
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of things. One thing I'd say, and all cities have this, but there's all sorts of volunteer boards and committees and commissions and things like that. So, uh, in Anoka, I don't know the exact number. We probably have 8 or 10 of them. Everything from Heritage Preservation Commission, so kind of the historic stuff, to the Parks and Rec Board, to Utility Advisory Commission, because the city of Anoka has a utility board, but a lot of cities have that. Planning and zoning, in Anoka, it's big, but a lot of growing cities, that's an important part. What do you want your community to look like? Where do you want things to go? That's a big part of it. And then everything down to that, we have a parking advisory board in Anoka. So if it's more business folks, but they're the ones that deal with stop signs and parking times and all that type of stuff. And so if you look at your particular community, you can go usually to your city website, or if you're on a township, even some of those different ones, they have planning and zoning boards and things. Just go to those and check, because a lot of times that's something that maybe only requires one meeting a month. Sometimes they're two or whatever. You can kind of pick what works for you. But it's a good way to not only get involved and bring up an initiative that you might have, but just know what's happening in your community. I was on the park board for 9 years, and the best part about that is not just talking about park related things, but I would always get updates on, hey, what's going on with this road project or this river thing or this development. And so it's kind of a good summary of what's happening in the city. And then usually there's, those groups can network together, and sometimes there'll be a joint meeting with another group. So I would say that's the first thing. But also there's a lot of nonprofits around, that do specific things. So every community has these Lions organizations are just volunteer groups. Um, the Anoka County Historical Society, that's something that I kind of was involved with a little bit when I was younger as well. And just all of that stuff. So pick your interest, like you said with work earlier, right? What interests you, and look for things out there. And sometimes you'll find opportunities you didn't even realize just by being involved.
Right. And I think it just goes back to that too. Like it's easy to voice your opinion and complain, but getting out there and doing something about it and actually know what's going on is a game changer.
And what you mentioned, it's interesting. So, I mean, we don't have to get too much into the whole social media thing. It's good and bad, right? There's a lot of pros and a lot of cons of that. But I try to be active. I would say I'm mainly more active on Facebook than anything else, just because there's a lot of folks on there. But it's a good way for people to communicate stuff, because before it was, what's the city doing? Well, it's on, the bulletin board at City Hall, or in the, page 47 of the newspaper or whatever. And so those types of things was difficult to communicate and understand what's going on. A lot of times now, somebody's already answered a question before I get to it. And I try to be pretty proactive on answering questions. But there's some people that answer things actually way better than I do. And I try to only interject when there's, maybe something I can add to it or correction or whatnot. But that's been amazing, because things happen so quickly. and people can respond so quickly that that also is a really good way to just engage with the community. It's not the only way, but it is a very good way.
Yeah, I like it because I can always like when I'm wondering like what building is going up there or what business is going in there. Like I usually can weed through the comments and figure it out. So, that's why I always care like what's going to be the new place to eat because priorities.
Exactly. Exactly. Hey, you know what? That's all right because how would you find that stuff out before? It would just be rumor and innuendo for forever until the sign was on the wall.
Yes. Like, oh, when is that? Did they put the sign up yet? No. Did they put the sign up yet? No. So I personally feel like you do a great job of being informative, transparent. I think that you do a really good job leading by example. I see you out in the community picking up trash, participating in community events, volunteering, saving the trees. I hear you telling us what's going around in Anoka. I see you thanking people and like shouting people out like, "Hey, I see you. I saw you did this." And, giving them credit that maybe people wouldn't know that they deserve. And let's be humble. Like it always feels good to get a pat on the back. So I think that you, circling back, do a really good job at leading by example. What do you look for in Anoka community leadership?
You know, I look for the same thing you're just talking about. It doesn't mean you have to do that, be totally out there and spend 30 hours of your week doing that type of stuff. But to me, what's important is, there's elected leaders, which, that's, like I said, there's certain responsibilities to that and there's certain soft things, but you can be a leader in your community in a lot of ways. And some people are on city council or mayor or county commissioners or whatever. A lot of the people that are very influential and do a lot of good work, they just do something. They decide, all right, this is an issue that I see. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna start working with people. I'm gonna solve this problem. Um, I'll say a good example of that was so it's been a few years, but it's still going on. Is up at the old state hospital cottages. Those are beautiful old buildings. They were built, 1904 through probably the late teens, and for basically a mental institution for folks.
Mhm.
And so the county has had those now, and they're expensive to maintain and to upgrade. And so a few years back, they didn't want to do it. It was too much money, and they were thinking of demolishing it. And so what happened was there's a group of citizens that decided, we're going to step up, we're going to do something. The city council at the time said, we're not, we don't want you to demolish those. We won't make your life easy to do it, but what can we do? And so after a few years, some solutions came about, and so the idea, it's now called Haven for Heroes, but remodeling a few of them, turning them into housing for homeless veterans. And so that's been a way to rehab a few of those buildings, and that's just been members of the community. One of the members was Senator Jim Abler, but he wasn't doing it as a senator. He was just doing it as a guy that lived in Anoka. Him and his
Mhm.
wife, really, they live right across the river and probably grew up and saw those things forever. And so another guy, Bart and Ellen Ward, just members of the community that decided this is something we're going to do. Doug Holcomb from the Legion, and so they all kind of have been working on this diligently behind the scenes for years and years, raising millions of dollars in money, donated labor, materials. And that's been a huge thing because it's shown, if anybody has a chance ever during a tour to go and view those, just to see what's been redone on those two cottages they've done already. They're just gorgeous buildings. I mean, you look at them and the way that things were built at that point versus today, it's totally different.
Yes.
But those are the best shelters I've ever been in. I mean, chandeliers and lead glass and just all sorts of cool stuff. And so that was just, again, people in the community saying, I'm going to lead by example. This is something I want to do. But circling back to just government, to me, I think it's important that you have leaders that are willing to lead by example, that are willing to go out there, talk to people, communicate. That's still something I think a lot of folks don't do so great at is getting back to people. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I might miss one here or there, but responding to comments, emails, phone calls, that type of stuff is just a real basic job. And unfortunately, a lot of times it gets lost on certain folks. So I hate to say that that's one of the things that people really like about me because it should be something that everybody does. It just
Mhm.
doesn't always happen.
I think that, I mean, one of the best bosses that I've ever had in my life was I work in healthcare, and I remember like there was bodily fluids on the floor, and I saw her like on her hands and knees, like cleaning it up, not just like telling somebody else to do it. And that always just resonates in my mind. Like, that's a true leader, like somebody who's gonna just get down and dirty and do what they have to do to be a team and, not just tell other people what to do, but to actually see them doing it themselves just speaks volumes.
Yeah, totally agree. You can't, that's the balance, right? You can't just do that all the time. You have to be able to delegate in positions of leadership too. But there's something to be said of just kind of leading the troops, I guess you could say. And
Hmm.
it is important. Especially at a local level, that's one thing people always ask, like, hey, would you be interested in running for something else, higher? And most of the time I just say, not really. My interests are my community. The reason I feel like I'm doing this is because I felt there was a need for people of different ideas and opinions to be involved. And it just the community is what's close to you. That's what real where you live. It's interesting to read about what's going on in Washington or the Capitol or whatever, but the vast majority of your life is driven by the decisions in the city, county, schools, all this stuff that's in the area you live. And so to me, that's what's most important, and that's what I try to be able to lead with, but also bring people along and say, hey, why don't you get involved? Because you never know what cool idea you can create if you just meet the right people.
Hmm.
Put your time in. That's what makes it cool.
So, living here your whole life, can you share some hidden gems or lesser known spots in Anoka that you've discovered?
Well, if I share them, then everybody else knows about them, right?
You don't
I
know
know,
if you
I know.
don't ask,
It's
Eric.
it's all good. There's not like a secret, chamber anywhere or whatever that
I
I
mean,
can
there are some
tell about.
speakeasies
You
around
know,
here, but I mean, you can find those on your own.
that's right. That's right. So there's some pretty cool spots. So like growing up around, um, I was the type of person that got on my bike, rode around, did whatever. You always explore places maybe you shouldn't when you're 14 or 13 years old, but you figure different things out. And so I always thought, one of my favorite places, even to this day, well, I should say there's two really favorite places in Anoka. One is just going down to like the Rum River core area, the old part of the town, um, because you can go by it on the paths, you can go by it on Main Street. It's very picturesque by the dam. It's all nice. But when you actually get down by the river, it's a totally different world down there. Just it's that history. It's a lot of nature that you wouldn't have expected in that environment. And there's so many unique things. I don't know how many years I've been doing it, like a trash cleanup usually in the fall down there. It started when we had some really low water one year, and now it's like every year we have low water. But you pick up garbage and all these other things, but at the same time, you would find old leather soles from the factory that used to be there 100 years
Mhm.
ago, and some people would find the old wire spectacles, and we found a skateboard that had probably been sitting in the water for 30 or 40 years, and just it's really that type of stuff is interesting, and that's just garbage, right? But and by the way, it's much better now. Every time we clean it up, there's a lot less stuff. But that's just a kind of a cool area that people probably have been hanging out and doing that type of stuff forever. It's right in front of your face, but a lot of people don't go down there and check it out. My other really place that I like a lot is, so if you ever go to the Anoka Nature Preserve, it's up by the county library, up Highway 7, 7th Avenue on 116. And so it's kind of tucked in. There's a newer neighborhood that's along Bunker and 7th there. But you go back behind the library, it's 200 acres. It's along the Rum River. There's oak savanna, oak forest. There's prairie. There's river. It's just a really cool place to just explore. And you'll be sitting out in the middle of this wide open field. Feel like you're in Iowa. Actually, that's its nickname is Iowa. And then you can see in the distance the Ramsey Water Tower and all these other things. But it's this kind of unique uh, just island there that you don't think about. And I've always loved that. Again, I'm a nature guy. It kind of revives me. So having something like that so close is to me is really really cool.
Yeah, and I think like we had mentioned earlier, one of the unique things about Anoka that we both love is you are in a city but sometimes you feel like you're not. Like if you're down by the river, it feels like you're not in the city. And if you're in the woods, it doesn't feel like you're in the city. You know, you can be really close to everything, but also super far away.
Yep, exactly. And connecting those things I'm talking about, there's the trail, the Rum River Trail. It's a trail that goes, for the most part, uninterrupted. There's a couple little spots near Pleasant Street, but it'll go from south of downtown and all the way up to the nature area. And there's some spots where you're on these bluffs overlooking things, surrounded by these, you know, 5 foot, 6 foot diameter cottonwood trees and 300-year-old oak trees, and it's crazy because you go 2 or 3 blocks the other way and you're on Seventh Avenue where everything's zooming by. And so I think that's really cool. That's one of the unique parts about having these rivers that run through town is they kind of just force nature upon people in a lot of areas, and um, it's great that it's there because it helps kind of connect um, the natural world with this kind of urban, busy world in which we live.
So the house that you live in on Monroe Street is a historical home that you moved from its original location and it was going to get torn down. It went up for auction. Now, did you already own the lot that you moved the house onto? How did all this work? Does this happen often where teardowns go up for auction and people maybe don't know about it and you get a better deal on it? Or, you know, give me that whole story. Like, what is on the lot where that house was?
Yeah, so kind of the story on that. So this I will say grew up. I was in that neighborhood for a long time. So we're talking kind of the old Christian Hill area, the south of Main Street. And so the house that was up, it was a fourplex. It was 1887, big giant Victorian type house, but it had been turned into a fourplex that the owner had lived in since 1960 up through 2010. I can't remember the exact year she passed away, but it was right around that time. And so the city acquired it because it was in an area that they wanted to do some redevelopment. And so most of the time when the city, at least for a long time, when they would buy property, they'd buy houses, it was instantly, all right, let's just demolish it and start fresh. And so there was a lot of pushback on that particular one because if you've seen the house, it's a really grand house. Just because it got turned into a fourplex doesn't mean it's terrible or whatever. But that's just something that happened a lot in Anoka and these older, bigger houses that got shot up, things like that. So we don't want to see it demolished. So the city's Housing and Redevelopment Authority, which is a commission under the city, I didn't mention it before, you can apply to be on. Um, they didn't want to really see it demolished, but they didn't want to do rehab work or move it or do anything themselves. And so what they decided to do was say, all right, we'll sell this house. We'll sell it to the right person for $1. But what you need to do is you need to, first of all, you have to move the house, and then secondly, you can't have it be a rental anymore. You have to turn it back into a single family. And so there just really wasn't takers for that because of the the expense and the cost and everything like that. And so my wife and I are both a little nuts apparently. So we decided we were at that point in life. We started, we were having kids and family was growing, and we were in a pretty little tiny cookie cutter 1900. I'll say 3 bedrooms generously. It was really 2 bedroom house. And so we were trying to look at something to expand, and we thought, hey, this is maybe something that could work. And so to answer your question, do people move houses, like this very often? Not really. Uh, Ramblers, 1-story houses, they're easier. They're kind of like, something you can throw on some wheels and move around. But 30-foot tall, big, giant monster houses don't move very often. But it's done. In fact, it's a little nugget. The house to the east of me, there's a yellow house to the east of my house. That was also moved. Probably, I think it was 2008 or 2010. So it happens. But it's usually kind of cost prohibitive to do that. People have to do it because the house is unique or they love the house. Especially the taller they get, the harder it gets too, because you run into trees and power lines and all that. So we were looking for a place to move it. And again, it's a large house and it can't go very far. So where's it going to go? You're not in an area with big open lots and all that type of stuff. So we were really scrambling for for a while because the Housing Redevelopment Authority put a deadline on it and said, yeah, I can't remember, a few months to figure something out. Every one we tried to find didn't work, or maybe it wasn't the best lot because maybe the location wasn't great. And so we didn't have a lot of options. And then sort of there was a Hail Mary at the last minute. I said, I found out the guy that owned the lot my house is currently on Monroe Street. He owned like 3 houses in one area. And he had just kind of redone the lot lines because there was a little like 1.5 story kind of house on the spot mine is now. But it had been trashed by renters where they plugged the drains, turned the water on, that whole deal. Really wasn't salvageable. So the lot, he kind of redrew the lot lines, and I looked at it and I said, hey, this actually will work for this if we could make it work. And it was 1 block away, you know, Monroe Street. It's not it's not like Main Street, but it's wide. There's enough space for it. And so said, hey, can I buy this old house from you and demolish it and all that type of stuff? And so we worked out a deal, brought it to the city and said, hey, this is what I interested in doing. And they said, okay. And so we did it. We took some time. It took, probably I had to rewire the house. I did that myself. So that took a year while it was in its old and new location. And they moved it in August of 2014 down the street, which is still talked about to this day. If you ever, you probably remember, but I swear I've talked to more people that watched my house move than were actually there. But, hundreds and hundreds of people, and it was at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a warm summer, evening. So it was the dinner crowd, the 2 Scoops ice cream crowd. They were all just hanging out on the lawn in front of the Sandburg School, just watching it happen. And so it was a pretty cool experience. I always tell people I would do that. Knowing what I know now, I would have done it the same way. I just don't want to do it a second time because it's just so much work.
I mean, all the stars aligned for you, Erik. I mean, you got
They totally
kind of
did.
lucky. Yeah,
They
doesn't
did,
happen.
and it's a weird little thing. Probably one of the reasons we're crazy enough is before I was even born, my parents moved a house out in Nowthen, the house I lived in when I was a kid. So they moved it onto 20 acres that Grandma split off from the farm. And then I'd helped a guy in St. Francis move an old schoolhouse. And then my wife's parents even moved a house, an old farmhouse up north in Aiken County that I had helped do a bunch of work with. So I'd been around it enough to know I wasn't going to be totally scared by it. But it was the first time I did it myself. And so I'm glad we did it. It's an awesome house. It's in a great location. I got sick. I ended up in the hospital after. Like it wore me out. But at the end of the day, I'm glad I did it. So
Here you are.
I'm still here. I got a good story to tell.
Yes. And a lot of people are familiar with it. So it's kind of a small legend, a legendary story. Like, is that true? Yes, it happened.
I keep a picture of the house, like the lights on it at night in the middle of the street, like right by our front door. So when you get people who walk by on the sidewalk and they talk about, oh, that house move. I just run in and say, yep, here's the picture. And they jaw drops. And it's pretty cool.
It is cool. Can we talk about sidewalk chalk law? Are we ever going to be able to write on our sidewalks again in Anoka? It's like one of those funny, like Southern laws, like you can't marry your cousin, or you can't wear a skirt on Saturday after 3. You can't ever write on the sidewalks in Anoka with chalk. Love it. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there was not that long ago, there was a lot of people with coat hangers on Main Street too, with that whole thing. So, there's always going to be hurt feelings, but when I take my dog for a walk, I love seeing the kids like, they played hopscotch, or they played foursquare. Oh, they drew a little cute picture. Like, that always just made my heart happy that we lived in a community where you were still seeing like younger families having kids and doing things that kids should be doing, right? So, it's a funny quote unquote thing, but you know, I get it. All right, Erik. So my controversial question for you is a personal situation that I am dealing with at my house. I'm going to set the scene for you. It's a beautiful summer day. The sun is shining down on me. I'm like, I'm going to open up all the windows in my house, get some fresh air in here. And what do I get wafts of? Marijuana, because it's legal. And now people can smoke it outside or in their driveway or in their garage, and the breeze just blows it in my house. And now my kids are like, hey, mom, what's that smell? Now I have to tell my kids, oh, all right, I guess we're going to have a marijuana talk now because everybody can. So we were like, we know it's legal. Let's just call the non-emergency cop line. Let's see what the police have to say. What can we do about this? Nothing. So neighbor to neighbor, what's your advice? Hmm. Like hopefully like the it wears off, right? The novelty wears off over time. Yeah. Well, you don't know if you don't ask, like I said. Is there anything else you want to share? Yeah. What's next for you, Erik? Right. Goes by so fast. And then where can we find you, Erik, if we have a problem and we need someone to solve it, or if we just want to tell you like thank you, where do we find you? Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Erik. Thank you for all you do for our community, and I'm sure I'll see you soon. Absolutely. You have a good night.